Welcome to Screen Junkies News. I'm Roth Cornett, and I am joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Mr. Billy Business.
Because when I'm here, that means we're talking some business today.
We got some business to discuss. And it involves streaming services, which we've done quite a bit of talking about, the streaming wars and how it all play out. We will continue to return to this topic as things unfold over the next couple of years in entertainment. But a report was released recently from Hub Entertainment Research that surveyed nearly 1,800 consumers in the U.S. who watch 5 hours of television and above per week in the month of December. So, well, they weren't watching it just in the month of December, to clarify.
It's actually odd to me that they chose December as their sample month, because that seems like kind of a skewed sample, but whatever.
It does. Because people are off work and things like that.
Yeah.
I watch so much more television than that a week that it actually terrifies me. I'm probably do like 20 hours a week. But here's the main takeaway from what they looked at. They looked at how people are using the various streaming services and what that might tell us about kind of the future.
Right.
Which is that people use Netflix most often to watch their, not surprisingly, original programming, Amazon to watch movies, and Hulu to watch TV shows from other networks. Now, when you look at this on the surface, none of this is really particularly shocking to us, but it does reveal a little bit more about what Netflix, for example, is doing right now, their business model.
I think the interesting thing about kind of all this data is like Netflix kind of knows exactly what their bread and butter is, which is originals. You don't go to Netflix because you want to watch a movie that was just in theaters within the last year. You know, you're going to do that at Amazon or Hulu. You go to Netflix because you want to watch Stranger Things, you want to watch Glow, you want to watch Making a Murderer. You know, even just those three are three completely different things that all Netflix has to offer. You go there for their originals, and that's where they're pumping all of that money that we always talk about them spending into.
Yeah, and they're also creating this model which harkens way back to the studio systems of yore, in which they are both the producers and distributors of their content. 100% produced and owned is what they're aiming for at this point, and which is most of the streaming services. Disney's going to be aiming for that as well, which is part of the reason they bought Fox, was to own all of that content and be able to distribute whatever they wanted on their streaming service. With Netflix in particular, they're also very thinking globally versus Hulu, right? Hulu is localized here because they don't have the licenses to those television shows internationally. Right. Netflix owns this in the international markets as well. So Ted Sarandos, who is the chief content officer, talked about spending $8 billion, which will go towards producing 30 new anime series and 80 new original films that will be released in 2018. Anime is, again, looking at a global market. And the Utes, the young ones, versus Hulu.
Sure.
Yeah.
Which is basically Hulu is a DVR for people who don't have DVR,
right?
Essentially. Because you go to Hulu essentially to watch something that you missed the night before. There's a chart that went with this study that actually shows the breakdown. When you can see on Hulu, when you look at original series, it's pretty low, even though they have The Handmaid's Tale. But more than any of the other services, other series, meaning things that would appear traditionally on cable or network television, that's the highest number on this entire chart. So Hulu's basically kind of, for better or for worse. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have original series. That doesn't mean that they don't have a great selection of movies, because they do. It just means that when you think of Hulu, you instantly think something that I missed last night. I need to watch Modern Family. I'm not going to Netflix. I'm going to Hulu.
Sure. And the thing is, that's all about the marketing and how they were set up. And they were set up originally with this partnership with the networks. And still, its parent, Disney, owns some of the content that will go there. And when Disney releases its streaming services, as we talked about before, it will, for the most part, be family friendly, for quadrant, and anything that's outside of that is going to go to Hulu. Whether things like the Marvel Netflix series stay on Marvel past the next 5 or 6 years, we will see how that plays out. But Hulu, and I think we're both agreed on this, is probably going to be the first of these services to die. And I think it's just because of how rapidly networks are adjusting, and how rapidly how we consume media is adjusting. And also because it's domestic, it's not international.
Yeah, I think, first of all, not being international, not just for streaming services, but almost for anything these days, it's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
If you can only sell your stuff stateside, you're missing out on the global market and you're going to get creamed. But for Hulu, I agree. I'm putting my stake in the ground. That will be the first casualty of the streaming war, will be Hulu. Just because I think even the way that Bob Iger talked about Hulu when the Fox acquisition kind of came about in December was, it'll be more adult oriented. We'll put some of the grittier stuff on there. We'll still keep it the way it is, but anything family friendly will go to Disney. To me, that sounds like that's what we'll do at first. Mm-hmm. We're going to keep the Handmaid's Tale and stuff until we can figure out something else. But I think when you get to a certain point, watching next day content is just not enough for people to hang on to, because we don't work like that anymore.
Yeah, we really don't. And I think a lot of people, you made this point earlier, for example, with CBS All Access, which will be, I'm not even considering in this conversation because it's so niche. And that's certainly like these streaming services are going to be, and basically for all intents and purposes, are the new networks.
Right.
You made a really good point, which was that probably they're seeing a spike right now on All Access with the conclusion of Star Trek Discovery for the people that were just waiting to binge it.
Right.
And then they're going to be out again, right?
Right. And it makes me wonder, like, of course, CBS Access is never going to come out and be like, this didn't work. Like, it'll just quietly fold someday.
Yeah.
But I also don't think, we talk about CBS Access, but I think that there's a lot of different networks that are in the same boat, like HBO Now. We don't talk about HBO in the same way that Netflix does, but don't be fooled. HBO spent $2 billion on content last year, and they're just going to keep ramping up because they have to keep up. Their traditional method of being a paid add-on to your cable bill, I mean, they were one of the first ones to realize this isn't going to sustain us for much longer, and actually were the first to split apart and say, well, we'll also offer a digital only. I think CBS was the next on that train. And I think a lot of other people are going to get on this streaming train, but I think that's going to water it down.
I think it is, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens with HBO as kind of like the inventor of premier content, right?
Yeah.
Netflix was chasing being HBO online, and now HBO is going to be chasing Netflix to be HBO online, right?
Right.
And how that all plays out, because ultimately, that brand identity, we trust HBO to have great programming, is and was so important. But can that compete when you look at something, even just financially, with something like Amazon, which, as we've said, most people are watching movies on Amazon. But what they also have is they were able to acquire movies to stream on Amazon and in theaters like Manchester by the Sea and The Big Sick. And they just have these multiple revenue streams that allow them to sort of compete in a different way. They have more long-term leverage in that way. The other thing that Amazon has that I invest in is, first of all, I'm an Amazon Prime member and I do everything on Amazon. I do a lot of things on Amazon, but I do the add-ons, for TV shows and series. I do it all the time. I always fall for it, So I watch HBO through my Amazon app.
Right.
And I watch Showtime through my Amazon app. And I'm not doing it on Hulu as much because it's easier for me to go to the place where I'm like, well, if I want to watch a movie, I'll watch a movie. But if I want to watch HBO that night, I'll watch HBO.
Sure, yeah.
It just becomes a hub for me. And I feel like that's probably, if you're lazy like I am, something other people probably are going to be doing more and more.
Well, I think that's kind of the point of some of these statistics that came out from this research is if I know that Amazon is a place for movies, I think it makes sense, instead of a Showtime or an HBO maybe trying to do their own thing, to get into these add-on services. I think CBS it would benefit them more, instead of to branch out and do their own app. What if they had made a deal with Hulu, like, we want to be on your service, but can we be an add-on like Showtime is for Hulu? I think adding on to previously established services is probably the best strategy, that, in my opinion, at the moment. And I think that that's something that Hulu's going to actually become itself when Disney takes it over. Hulu will be kind of like the add-on
to
the
Disney's-
Disney service.
Yeah,
right.
I think so. I think it'll be the adult add-on in a way. And yeah, Showtime is available via Hulu, but it's also available via Amazon. And that's kind of my point. It has more options. But what it doesn't have is a very clear identity in terms of being a content creator. Because when I think of Amazon, I'm thinking of so many different things. I'm thinking of my toilet paper and Manchester by the Sea. Appropriately enough. So that's where it gets a little tricky, just in terms of Netflix's brand identity. I think right now is the clearest. We create premium original content, even though, technically speaking, a lot of that content we think of as Netflix original wasn't. It was produced elsewhere.
Right, and licensed in. Yeah, and I think, too, another thing that we should definitely hit upon is that we're talking about us. This is how we view things. This is how consumers view things.
But how did the Utes do it?
How did the Utes do it, man? How did the Utes do it? Because they do it differently, and we kind of talk all the time, but there's a second graph that's in there that shows exactly the breakdown kind of where most consumers or general consumers, where they spend their entertainment time versus the very coveted demographic of 18 to 24-year-olds. Now, TV shows, 46%. I would assume that also includes originals like Glow, Stranger Things. But if you look over at the 18 to 24-year-olds, they are spending most of their time in gaming and online video. Gaming has always been a big industry that I think a lot of other industries are kind of not jealous of, but they're definitely trying to get a piece of that. But online video is interesting as it pertains to this discussion, because when you talk about online video, you're talking about your Vimeo, YouTube, obviously, Twitch. It's an audience that is being groomed to get their entertainment or their content for free.
Yes. And the other piece of that is, well, I want to put an asterisk and come back to this because I think it's like the most interesting part of where things may be headed. But for gaming, where that still remains a question mark for me for that demographic is that, you've seen sort of an attempt, PlayStation did Powers, the TV show,
right.
And you've seen a small attempt to sort of introduce content and original content through consoles, but there's not been a really big play there. And I wonder if that might start to shift, or if they're just like, we're fine making all of this money via the games. When VR starts to become more interwoven with entertainment and in movies, does that start to shift?
I feel like Microsoft already kind of knew these stats and kind of knew what was up, because their Xbox One was all about how can we make Xbox the only thing that you need in your living room, even including extra HDMI ports so that you could literally have TV or video or YouTube in the corner while you're playing your full game. So I definitely think that, gaming is definitely something that the game makers are definitely aware of, but in terms of the other way around, trying to get people to use those gamings for just entertainment in terms of Powers is a great example.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the right platform
for it.
Right.
And interestingly enough, and this might be one of the reasons, you just described a scenario in which someone with extreme ADD is watching 7 different screens at once, which is
that's all of
that's
us.
all of us, right? But particularly not only when you think of people, the 18 to 24-year-olds watching things online, primarily in a large portion, for free, which is going to impact how much you have to pay for. Are you willing to pay for something that you're used to getting for free? But what you watch and how you watch it. I mean, we just looked at the trending videos on YouTube today.
Right.
And when you are on that platform, for me anyway, I'm watching things in bite sizes, and then I might go down a rabbit hole and end up spending an hour or two there thinking, oh, well, it'll just start with that 3 minutes. That's how the dealers get you.
Are you telling me you've never gone down the Wikipedia black hole and it's 4 a.m. and you're like, how did I get
I've gone down that black hole.
Roald Dahl's
Yeah.
entire list of books he's written?
Yeah. I mean, I go down that rabbit hole all the time. And I think that is another interesting thing for me too, in terms of if you are, I watch things generally speaking, other than when I go down my YouTube rabbit holes. Generally speaking, the way I did growing up, I watch movies and I watch TV shows. I now binge watch because that's a thing that exists and it wasn't.
Right.
And I may go and watch just the monologues from late night shows because I don't want to watch your whole thing. So those are the ways that that's adjusted. But if you grew up really watching primarily like YouTube and those bite-sized pieces of entertainment, what happens in the next 30 years? What are you expecting from your entertainment?
I mean, we should have seen signs of this almost 20 years ago now with music, because we learned very quickly that we only want a couple songs. We don't want the album experience anymore.
Yeah.
We just want a couple songs. Same with like the YouTube. You don't want to watch the entire Jimmy Kimmel. You just want to see the one joke segment that he did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Another thing that was interesting that I noticed when we were looking through the trending videos is right now, I don't know when you're watching this, but right now is the Winter Olympics. And there were highlight reels of the ice skating event that had just happened. And the trending video under it was almost like a tutorial or science of why the triple axel is so special in ice skating. So it's almost like, from what I take, is like YouTube and this generation is more interactive with the content that they want to know. They don't just want to absorb one piece of content. They want to know, okay, ice skating. Let me see the highlights. Okay, now I want to know what's that one thing. Let me go over here. It's much more fast.
Tell me about this triple axel.
Right. It's much more fast. It's much more direct. It's much more, it's like, I don't know how you could ever make a service based on someone's tastes purely from YouTube.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the problem, is like, eventually, how are you going to get these people to commit to a Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Disney, pick your poison, you know?
Yeah, because right now it's a different consumer base that is subscribing, but over the next 10, 20 years, those are the consumers that these companies are aiming for, to be their long-term clientele. Yeah, but how are they going to do it? Especially like YouTube Red tried. They said, oh, come pay for a thing. You're not going to pay for a thing that you're used to getting for free. Trust us. Here at Screen Junkies News, like
we may
or may not know anything about that. You're not going to, and so how that eventually plays out, not just if and when maybe people just eventually become adults and are willing to pay for things. I'm not sure. I still resent it, and or does the type of content we see being produced at a premiere level eventually change?
Yeah, I don't know. And the other thing too is like, does Netflix, does Amazon, does Hulu, do they look at this study and think like, do we need more content that's geared towards gaming? Do we need more content that's bite-sized, like an online YouTube video? Like, will the viewing habits of the 18 to 24 demographic change them, or are they going to try to find a way to get them to come over to their side of viewing, which would be a bad strategy if I had to guess.
Disney's going to say, come to the dark side, come to our side. Yeah, eventually they'll have kids and they'll want to give their kids an app and they'll have the streaming app, the Disney streaming app. I don't know. It'll be pretty interesting to see how that works together. If anybody can crack it, probably Disney can. But that is one of the pieces that makes me most curious to see what entertainment even looks like in the next 20, 30 years, because their experience, the youngest, even like really little kids, sometimes only watch YouTube.
Right.
Which...
I mean, that's my niece. She watches DIY videos, which I didn't even know what that was until she explained it to me. My 5-year-old explained to me. But I think Dan said it, where I think this is kind of an age of everybody in the next probably couple years, 3 years, 4 years, anyone that has any sort of IP, any sort of property, they're going to start their own service. We're seeing it with Disney, who makes sense. We're seeing it with DC. That one to me is a little bit more interesting than Disney, because DC has a rabid fan base and they definitely have tons of property, but do they have enough to stand on their own? And that's kind of what you see a lot of the criticisms at CBS was. It's like, yeah, you got Star Trek and I guess Big Bang Theory, but like, is that enough to start a thing? And I think we're going to start to see them kind of collapse or converge.
Yeah, I think so too. Disney has such a strong brand recognition in a way that so few other properties do. I mean, we're seeing, final thought on this, insanely, Paramount's making a network, right? I mean, Paramount does not have that brand recognition.
Right.
Nobody really associates the films that come from Paramount necessarily directly with them unless you're like working in Hollywood.
Sure.
And then you still really don't necessarily you might go, what studio did that? Oh yeah, it was Paramount. And then also to be making a network right now. But anyway, mazel tov, good luck to you.
Hats off to you.
Hats off to you. And we wish you well with that. But it does seem to be a very odd strategy right now. Maybe are we going to get 3-minute House of Cards in the future?
I wouldn't no, not 3-minute House of Cards, no. But I wouldn't doubt if there's like a clipped version, and in case you missed it version, you know, like right now, if you want to get into House of Cards, get your encyclopedia ready, carve out like 24 to 40 hours because you're in for the long haul. But I could see them doing like, like little highlight reels or something of different shows. They've got to evolve. They've got to change. You can't shy away from the data. You just can't shy away from, we saw this I keep saying we saw it in music, and they hurt for a long time. I don't think it was ever the same. We're starting to see it in movies now. Like, if you do not evolve, the audience will find a way to move past you.
Yeah. I think our final thought for today is evolve or die. Adapt or die? Adapt or die.
Adapt or perish.
Adapt or perish.
There you go.
That's how we do history. See, we just did a YouTube video. Eventually we landed on the thing. Adapt or perish. And that is our motto here at Screen Junkies News. Thank you, Billy, for joining me on this one today.
This was fun, and I'm sure we're going to have much more streaming wars coverage to talk about.
Many, many more. And including, I do think there will be a convergence with VR and how that technology evolves, particularly for gamers. And I'll be watching it all from a rocking chair in my old age, going, I don't know what the Utes are doing. You tell me what the Utes are doing in the comments below. How do you consume your media? Has it changed over time? Do you think that it will continue to change? Do you want it to change? Or are you stuck in your ways like myself?